And finally, we exist to ensure that a few do not decide for the many. If the Bermuda government is unwilling to stand strong for our society by upholding marriage between a man and a woman, as previous governments have done for hundreds of years, then the voting population of Bermuda must decide about marriage policy. Through a referendum and not by elected judges. The reality is that the redefinition of marriage results in reordering society, restructuring the family unit, and a radical cultural change in other countries such as the United States and Canada, where the evidence is obvious. The redefinition of marriage leads to transgender, same-sex curriculum being taught in schools, the rights of parents being diminished to protest against such education, and a challenge to introduce other forms of marriage, and those who support traditional marriage become labeled as bigots, and those who introduce or are spreading hate speech. Recently, the Chief Justice appointed by the governor made a ruling to give overseas partners of same-sex couples the right in Bermuda to reside and seek employment as a spouse, which results in a cultural change in our country, giving only a short time for implementation, that being by February 29th to be exact. The government did not appeal this ruling, and we believe that marriage in Bermuda should be decided by Bermudians. And then the legislation should make the appropriate legislation to uphold the desires of the people, rather than continue the legislative changes being decided upon and enacted by just a few, particularly the judiciary. This is not responsible governance. In a democracy, laws must reflect the desires of its people. Additionally, the European Court of Human Rights has this in discussing the role of the judiciary when deciding same-sex marriage in the European states, and I quote, "As matters stand, the question whether or not to allow same-sex marriage is left to regulation by the national law of the contracting state. In that connection, the court observes that marriage has deep-rooted social and cultural connotations which may differ largely from one society to another. The court reiterates," this is the European Court, reiterates that it must not rush to substitute its own judgment in place of the national authority. We are best placed to assist and respond to the needs of society, close quote. In other words, let the people decide what they want in regards to marriage because it impacts all of society. In conclusion, we want to reiterate for clarity so that Cabinet is fully aware of our objectives. Firstly, we know all civil unions lead to same-sex marriage. It's happened in every jurisdiction thus far. The government will introduce civil unions by default. They are introducing same-sex marriage. Therefore, a vote in Parliament for same-sex unions becomes a vote for same-sex marriage. Hence, the government will be held responsible for that decision. Secondly, we have stated we exist to ensure that the Bermuda government expeditiously enacts supremacy clauses in the Marriage Act 1944, Human Rights Act 1981, and Interpretation Act 1951, and the Matrimonial Clauses Act 1976 to ensure that marriage remains between a man and a woman by definition, as the majority of the world has done, because marriage is the only relationship that has public benefit for all society. We cannot have a society that says fathers are essential, but then laws that make them optional. And our last one we've stated today is that we request that a few stop making decisions for the many. Marriage in Bermuda should be decided by the voting population of Bermuda, not by elected judges. So the future ruling reflects the people's desires for the sake of our children and our grandchildren. If Cabinet is unwilling to stand for the betterment of society, then marriage in Bermuda should be decided by the voting public in a referendum.